I'm here with Marsha today, Marsha John-Greenwood, and she's the VP of People and Culture at TIFF. So do you want to tell us about yourself?
Sure, thank you, Taha. So yes, you've just introduced me, Marsha John-Greenwood, VP of People and Culture. So my portfolio covers all things related to our internal people. So, you know, who we have, our great staff and our teams. And also how we operate as an organization, like, you know, as an employer, how we look after our staff. And the wider portfolio is also includes diversity. So really supporting the organization in the great work they do already. I have an overarching responsibility of our diversity strategy that complements our organizational strategy and really leans into specific areas that we want to continue to make sure that we're giving a good experience to all film goers, and also, you know, the work that we do around labs and programs to really help the next and future creatives in that space as well.
You've mentioned that in your role at TIFF, you optimize HR by integrating like new technologies. So how does AI play a role in this optimization?
That's a great question. And AI is a really big question mark, especially for us here in the work that we do, because obviously we show like great films, and you know, we introduce new films creatives to whether it's Canada or wider. But AI in terms of HR, I actually see it as a great enabler. We're a very lean team at TIFF, like we're not big. And so what happens is AI is a great opportunity for us actually to take some of the grunt work away. And then it allows my team to start being able to kind of focus on that value added, that technical side of HR. So from a technology point of view, there's a couple of things I would say. One is around how quickly, you know, whether you're using, we're calling it AI now, but HR and organizations I've worked in have always used some sort of machine learning, you know, auto prompts, etc. So this is, yes, we're in another generation where we're calling it artificial intelligence because we know it can do more, but it can take out things like really do quick, whether it's information gathering or synthesizing, you know, what we're trying to present. It can also take out some of the research piece as well. The thing for me, especially in my field of work, is that check-in. Like AI does not replace the quality of what we do. What it does, it just fast forward some of the things that may take us a bit longer, like if you're doing research for a new program. So I rolled out a performance management program when I first came to TIFF 3.5 years ago. And so the research that goes into that, with if I'd applied, and I did a little bit of using some sort of machine learning, but AI now would be in advance that can synthesize that information very quickly. And then my job is to then really assess that, check, you know, the validity of what it's providing for me. And also then I've got to make sure it's custom to my organization. So that's how I see it helped someone of my level. Strategic work, so you can do some groundwork which is a lot quicker, and so it really helps us kind of focus on the bit that it needs to be from, you know, the organizational lens, from the human-centric lens, which is a person. And then for my team in terms of processes, we're not seeing the full benefit of it yet, but I do expect to help with some of what I call workflow. So when processes need to be done, we actually need sometimes it to be done a little bit quicker because it's relying on a person to go in and to press a button and to do that. AI or anything around that will help kind of do that. I don't have to have my team emailing someone to remind them. They can help with some of that. So I definitely see it's a benefit to organizations that have smaller teams, a benefit to organizations at larger teams because their data points are more, right? So they need that help in terms of maybe volume. Mine isn't so much volume, it's more around the administration and keeping things moving.
To transform the way people see the world is your mission statement.
Yes.
And so how does that inform the way you integrate AI into this cultural organization versus your previous roles in the private sector?
I think the AI question, and I know it's the theme, it's the hot topic, it's a bit mute for me. Okay, so, and the reason why it's a little bit of a mute thing is that yes, TIFF's the mission statement and why I'm there is because I recognize that in terms of from an arts and cultural perspective, from the terms of providing a platform for different viewpoints to be seen, for conversations, to create conversations and continue conversation, and to help people maybe understand, has always been a feature of my work. AI doesn't play into that. AI may play into the fact that film writers may use some of that, but that's out of my control, right? But in reality, that is probably the mission statement of TIFF is very, very close to my value system, and is connected to some of the work I've always done. Because I'm working with people, because I've always worked in a space where my kind of goal is to ensure that we create an environment that an employee can be their best self. They can bring their whole self to work. They can be able to perform with the support of their managers and the environment. And so all of my roles for decades have been about, how do I support the organization do that? So the link may be going back to the technology. Yeah. I'm going to go wider than the AI. Is that prior to probably a TIFF, my last maybe 3 roles were directly related to implementing systems and technology to assist. And that goes back to that first question, or second question that you asked about how is it helping? And I said to you that machine learning in HR is not new. So we've been using machine learning for decades, just different ways, right? And so now the complex, it's got so clever, right? So the evolution, we're now talking about AI, but for some of us that have been in there, I've implemented HR systems that have helped us to get, as I talked about before, workflows done quicker. I've looked at systems where we have lots of information to help us that have prompts to be able to serve the employee better and answer questions from an HR perspective. And many of those systems now have an AI component, but they've always had something connected to, whether it's machine learning or information or being able to prompt and help. And so for the last maybe 8-9 years, those implementation, and it's probably 3 in total that I was involved in different, quite large organizations, have enabled then the HR function to be able then to do more value-added work. So more than knowledge, right? You can't, yes, to a certain extent, I understand technology is helping with, taking prompts and understanding and throwing things out. But it doesn't take away from a professional, an HR professional like myself and many others who have had many years experience, who, in a human situation or a case, need to be able to think through, critically thinking. And AI hasn't quite done that yet. I know people think it has, but not quite in this space. So the critical thinking to be able to navigate and to help, and also to see that wider impact on how those decisions or advice play out. In terms of supporting maybe the business or a business leader and therefore the organization. So technology has always been a key part. I love technology. I'm a bit of a system nerd. I like the fact that it can help enable a business to do their very best and to ultimately help, going back to your point, the employee to be in an environment where they can do their work to the best of their ability.
Well, thank you for painting that picture for me. You also lead DEI at TIFF. And so how do you make sure that the algorithm that these AI tools run on don't reinforce the very systemic biases that you're working to dismantle?
Yeah, so I think that's an excellent question. And my qualifier here is that we're not fully using AI like that, because to your point, there's so much work to do. So I want to make that clear. We're actually about to roll out our first official AI policy for the organization. I'm fully aware, and one of the things that we're aware of when we looked at our policy was really being careful about the information and where you're getting that information from, and having that lens, right? And so that goes back to my first point, which is about you may gather information, you can't be completely reliant on the information, because there are biases. So there's been a lot of research into this, and it will continue to happen. And so really what's going to be important for me and for my colleagues, yes, I have two lenses, one from the organization, is to really assess that, is to keep on auditing that, to keep on asking the questions. That's one thing. And then, you know, to ensure that when we have those information, that when we're actually looking at how that's used, because it's also how information is used, and that, to your point, it does not reinforcing decision making in that way. And so it goes back to what your usage of AI is. If you're using AI and saying, I'm going to make a decision based on what someone's thrown out from the AI, then that's a problem. Right? So
Yeah.
if you're gathering information, because remember when I was talking about, I was saying it's helping kind of synthesize that information. That information can be many different things for different people depending on that. So the question is valid, and it's going to continue to be valid, and it is definitely in the way that you use that. And so one of the things we're doing is being very clear about how, you know, the organization uses that information from any AI source, also having some sort of check-in ability in terms of that, and guidance as well, to help people make decision. It does not make your decision. And so I think that really is the difference between, you know, taking everything as almost gospel that comes out of a system, as opposed to applying, as I said, an organizational lens, which is important because you have to sense check it.
I wonder, like, what are some specific ways, like that AI has improved your workflow up till now?
I mean, you have to validate source points, but we've been validating source points for years, right?
Yeah.
So your research points, even, you know, before we had, you know, whether you're using Google, whether you're using different sources, whether you're using, you know, the HBR, like the Harvard Business Reviews, or researchers that do that work, you know, for you, and you bought a membership. So AI's probably made it a little bit more accessible. So I think in terms of getting that information, which is a benefit, right? And I know there's a lot of fear about what the future looks like, but then there was fear when we before your time. But I'm of an age where, you know, we didn't have laptops and computers, right? So when I was working in that environment, we had other things that looked not quite like how they look now. So there's always going to be a bit of fear, but that's good.
Yeah.
Because it means that we keep ourselves honest, we keep asking, we keep checking the judgments that we're making based on these things. So for me, it's really about an enabler, and there's lots of things that enable people to do their jobs better. And if we treat it like that, we're okay. It's when it starts getting into, as you said, some of the areas we have to be very, very careful about, around where are they getting their data source, you know, how, where does it lean to in terms of demographic, the biases. And so there's lots of discussions around opportunities to make sure that more information goes in there from a more kind of, you know, broader spectrum. But it's almost like, you know, again, if you think about when Wikipedia came in, like Wikipedia could be, anybody could create that, right? And so again, you had to check your source, you had to check the information. And so I think there's definitely a role to play around having, you know, making sure people are very firm about check your source, make sure you're comfortable, don't, you know, but then there's the other side that say be careful of what you put in there, because if it's rubbish in, it's rubbish out, is an old saying. But in terms of that, it's true. So I'm very, like, again, working in the space I work, we don't trust anything. We have to validate everything. So if you take that mindset that you have to validate the information, you have to check your sources, just like you do, you know, if you're in university and you're doing your study, you got to research, you got to know everything that's come out. So I don't want the speed to take out the need to really validate, be careful, check and double check. Like, you know, we can't afford in a lot of our roles to be making errors or making assumptions based on faulty information.
You actually bring up a good point, I think, in terms of like the fear of all these new technologies with the internet and then now AI. So recently at TIFF Lightbox, TIFF played the AI doc, or How I Became an Apocalyptic. And so how do you kind of balance the apocalyptic side of AI with the kind of more optimist side of AI in your leadership?
I can't answer that. I think it's a very individual thing. I think you have to keep yourself well informed. And I'm going to be honest. I don't lean to one way or the other. I suppose I'm a liberal, I suppose, not politically liberal, but
Yeah.
how I think. And so I think it's actually important to, again, many of us can go down a kind of tunnel of, especially with, and I suppose this is AI led. If you think about your social media, if you look at one thing that starts to take you down that path, then you're going to get 10 things that take you down that path. And depending on how you receive that information, that could become your reality. Right. So I think this kind of broad, there's pros and cons of everything. And we know that the algorithms and things, they do it to me all the time. I just start deleting things. Like, I'm just like, not interested, not following, whatever. But so there is an ownership on us as individuals to take that. Like, as an organization, we are going to present hundreds of films. Why are we doing hundreds of films? We're doing hundreds of films so that you can choose which ones you want to see.
Yeah.
Right? Our responsibility is to give you the variety. Your responsibility is to choose what you like. I mean, you could go with something that you truly believe in or something that's a bit you're curious about. So our job is not necessarily to steer you in one way or another. Our way is to give you an opportunity to decide, be curious, watch something that you would never think that you're going to watch. And actually the fact that how, our whole festival and our all year programming, we do a mix obviously of mainstream and non-mainstream, but that's because we want that kind of variety in there. So again, I think getting kind of, and again, preference, right? Personal preference. We're not going to tell you that's right or wrong, but we're certainly not, in terms of our filming and programming, we want to give variety so that the individuals have their choice and they can choose a path that they enjoy. And if they didn't enjoy it, guess what? It's like, okay, that was 2 hours out of my life. I'm not going to get back, but it is what it is, right? That's your choice.
And I mean, 2 hours in a movie, I think, is a lot better than the 2 hours of doom scrolling people do these days. So,
which exactly, yeah. So you have that option, but I think I think I think it's awareness. I think there's an awareness, and this is not just about AI, but this is in general how our world works now. We can, as I said, you could very much go down a rabbit hole very quickly. And if that supports your thinking, that's fine. But if it doesn't, it can be quite scary, and there could be lots of things, right? We have a world where lots of things are going on, and I suppose there's a balanced approach about looking at all or hearing all of the sides. And then yes, there's our own personal preference as to what we prefer, what we don't prefer, and what we don't want to see more of, right? And as long as we take that control, it's very individual. But as an organization, obviously we're films lovers, so we want to be able to share films that we think might be interesting, and they're going to cover some of the current topics, some of futuristic topics, things in the past that have led us to where we are. And the main important thing is that variety and that diversity of viewpoints and diversity of storytelling. That's really the critical thing, from different people's eyes, different, races, cultural backgrounds, which make it just so interesting to be alive in that way, because you can see all these different viewpoints of how a story can come together and then be presented for us to then absorb and have our own opinions about.
In terms of like the diversity of movies, and I think what makes it be so remarkable is you get all these perspectives that you could never have without like these artists giving you that perspective, right?
Exactly.
What advice would you have for future filmmakers and future people who are going to be managing HR at these festivals around the world? What would you say to them?
Oh, wow. That's two really big different ones. So let me finish on the film one, because we were talking about film. I think what's really interesting, and again, I'm not professing to be an expert. I'm new to the industry in a way, in terms of the space of lover of arts and culture for life. But what really stands out for, I will say, new filmmakers or emerging, because it's not an age thing, it's kind of just where you are in your filmmaking journey, is that you really need to understand the whole business. Like, regardless of if you're a writer, acting, looking to direct or produce, there's a whole world also behind that, the grippers, the camera people, the cinematography, the music. And then there's the business, the legal side, you know, the finance side. Not saying that you have to be an expert in all these places, but wherever you are in as part of that, it's really inherent on you understanding it. And that has been something that has kind of really, I've heard it and I've seen it in practice. So when I talk to, I run something at our festival called the Black Excellence Brunch, which is for Black creatives who are emerging and established. And we sometimes have panel discussions. Our first one in 2023, we had Director X, and he talked about it. He talked about understanding, you know, every part of it. And we know his background came from a music video director into, you know, a director of TV programs, etc. And when he said that, that kind of resonated. So for me, like if you're a film student, then you're looking at, and your craft, you know, you're getting your craft and you're focused on your craft. It's really important for you then to explore the business side. I was speaking to a colleague recently. We were at the Black Screen Office Symposium, which was fantastic. I'm sure it's fantastic every year. This is my first time that I got to go there. And I was just talking to a colleague, and we were just talking. He went to film school, and he said, and they were talking about the business. And he said, that's the one thing. He says he came out of film school and he now, you know, quickly realized that he didn't understand the business, and that was missing.
Yeah.
So I'm just hearing it. And so for emerging filmmakers, whatever your lens is into your film, into that world, make sure you take the time to look and understand the business. Find a course that's going to allow you to do that. Find opportunities. Be curious to do that. The other thing is to be proactive, right? And again, you've got your craft, whether it's on the creative side or the other side, but being proactive, looking out for festivals like TIFF. We do run lab programs, you know, so we'll have like we've got one this year. I think they close this weekend, depending on when this goes out, but it's mid-April. And they're a variety. They're writers' labs, they're directors, they're, you know, TV series, etc. And there are lots of organizations that also support filmmakers. So, you know, you can be studying this, but then you've got to almost practice your craft. The other thing that's coming out for some of that again, I'm kind of keeping my ear and listening, and this is the curiosity side of how my brain works, is we're starting to see different channels being used to present material or present, you know, and so, yes, we know the regular TikTok, and we know a number of other channels, but not only channels, the medium. So I think for filmmakers now, there's opportunities for them to almost get some of their product out, right, quite early, using these different channels, whether it's Instagram and the types of mediums that, and I'm sure you'll be familiar with them, Taha, around microdramas, you know, vertical productions, which are very small, you know, they're small in time, filmed on cameras, but what they're doing is allowing filmmakers to come to almost the market quicker, right? Again, it has to be organized, and there's a whole business behind it. But the reality is that it's allowing you to kind of almost do your POC, right? Your proof of concept, right? Looking at how you can get and see what your audience like. And there was a very interesting gentleman, and I can only remember his first name, Tupe. I can't remember his second name off the top of my head, but he was talking at this symposium I was at, and he has, I think, 2.3 million TikTok followers. So he does content there, but he's now moving into different channels, right? And so having that foresight to look at how you present whatever your story is, whatever you want to tell. And the other areas, that last one, because 3 is enough, right? Remember, is about the marketing of how you market yourself. And obviously social media can help that if you're a social media person, but there's also this, you're starting to see more layers of that marketing. I was just, and I don't know, like, I'm a huge Michael Jackson fan, so obviously grew up in the era of Michael Jackson, and obviously the film's coming out. soon, and they are going crazy with the marketing, as you might expect, right? King of Pop. So now everything's trending like high. Now, if you're a new filmmaker, obviously you haven't got that background experience, but you do have to think about all your different ways of bringing, you know, some interest to your medium. There's another film that I think it's David Oyelowo and Nate, gosh, I can't remember his last name now, but two directors, they're launching a film called Newborn, and they've just done this huge marketing piece through, I think it's through Times Square, New York Times Square, where they've just got this box, this see-through box with this man who looks like he's got his gel costume on, and they've got him through, you know, him reading in that box. But now everyone's like, whoa, what's that? Like, you know, so not saying that you have to go to those extremes. Obviously, you know, emerging filmmakers are coming up, but you do have to be, it goes back to the first point about knowing the business, but it also means about you have to also be able to market it, because one of the things that we hear consistently is that you could have a project that's great. You could have someone that wants to distribute, but the marketing dollars may not be as big as someone who's well known or etc. So, but it's important, because that project is, whether it's at that level or smaller level, becomes becomes that filmmaker's way to attract audience, etc. And then obviously, you know, use the smaller TIFF is great, and obviously you can apply to TIFF, but there's a lot of festivals, so you have to have a strategy about how you want to come to market, which could be part of that marketing as well. So those are just my learned things. They're not like from some like you know, years film person, but my observations, you know, what I've seen, what I've heard, and what is consistent in those three things. So learning the business, as I said, you know, thinking about your channels and, you know, the type of product that you bring to market, and then really thinking about, you know, how you then market those and have a presence with it as well.
With the micro dramas and all of that. So I think it's really cool that you mentioned it, because it's really an up and coming industry, new industry coming up. So, and it's kind of scary because it's not unionized. And then how do you kind of?
And I think it's worth a good look at research. I think the other thing is about it, just how this has come up, something else is going to come up.
Yeah.
You know, and so always being curious enough to understand that there's, you know, there's a number of ways to present work, etc. And it's just so interesting. And I mean, I had a fourth one, but I'll save it for another time. But it's you know, I'm an observer, so Taha, I take a lot of time just listening and watching, and I like and then I'll get my little theme, and then I'll speak to a few people and think, is it just me, or is this really what's happening? And so that's why I'm able to talk to those points in particular, because they're reoccurring things that are coming up. First of all, it's very quiet, then it gets loud, right? And so undeniable in that aspect.